give
Good morning and welcome to the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors meeting for September 24th, 2019. We will begin with the closed session.
Item 1, conference with labor negotiator pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6, closed session with County Designated Labor Negotiator Che I. Johnson regarding employee organization Service Employees International Union.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, we will go to closed session and return at 9 o'clock.
Develop our programming and materials for our children ages 5 through 8. I had asked for this grant and had it approved when I still had a staff person to work on this, but that staff person got a full-time job, so she left me. But volunteers stepped up and have helped me spend this money and develop these kits. I wanted to, this kind. We've added 20 more of these, and I'm really, really happy with the ones that we've been able to add with this grant. We've really put a lot of the A, STEAM is science, technology, engineering, art, and math, and we really have a lot of art for these little ones. So I think it's going to be great fun. We also were able to develop some programming for these kids, and last Thursday evening, this volunteer who's been working on this and I went to Angels Camp and met with a Girl Scout group. And I don't know if you know this, but Girl Scouts now have something like 4 badges that are to do with coding. So we use this little mouse, which you program, you make a path for him, and then you program him, and then he follows the path and finds the cheese. So we worked with about 7 little girls last week in Angels Camp Branch in the evening for their troop and did their introductory coding class with them. And this is one of the things that we were able to purchase with this grant. We've done this at San Andreas as well. So I appreciate so much the help that the California State Library has given me, and also the help of volunteers. And I want to give a huge shout out to a young man named Maxwell Stickles, who is a graduate of Calaveras High School. He worked with us for 2 years on with our Teens for Tech program, where teens come in and help our people who don't know how to use their devices use them. So he went to Cal Poly last year, came back this summer. Sorry? Caltech, sorry, and thank you, and asked, is there anything I can do for you this summer? So he worked with us on this grant, did amazing visuals for us, because he's really, really computer savvy, so he was great, and even did programming with the kids. I don't know what impact this will have ultimately on his life choices, but he was so excited about doing this, and he's a very shy kid, but really stepped up to this service. So California State Library, volunteers, and even our young people helping us develop our programming. And finally, I would like to announce that on our website, calaveraslibrary.com, click on to Catalog Plus, you will now see a block that says Canopy. This is a video streaming service that you can use with your library card. Movies, yes, but even better, documentaries and great courses. I don't know if any of you have ever taken great courses, but they're video programming to teach you to do all kinds of things. I looked on this morning, there's cooking, photography, birding, life skills development, all kinds of things, and all of this will be free with your library card. I mention this to say thank you to the San Andreas Mountain Ranch Friends of the Library, little group of men and women who support the Central Library with programming and events. They gave me the money to do this. So for the entire county, they are helping us all have this wonderful service. I hope you'll enjoy it. We're testing it this year. If it's a success, we'll be able to continue it. So check it out and see what you like.
Nancy, where is it on your website?
Calaveras Library, and then if you go to the Catalog Plus, on the left-hand side of that, you'll see the link to that.
Thank
and
you.
You just put in your card number. Now, you can't have fines. If you have fines, you can't use it. But I love this. I love this whole thing that I'm presenting this morning because to me it shows what partnerships and teamwork can do. I have the Board of Supervisors, great supporters of the library services. I have volunteers. I have our youth. I have the California State Library, and then the Friends of the Library. And working together, we can really create new programming and wonderful information services for our county. So I thank you so much for your part in it, and I'm looking forward to a new fiscal year full of lots of fun and new stuff. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nancy. Judy?
Judy Hawkins, Human Resources and Risk Director. Good morning, Chair, members of the board. I am here this morning to invite you to the Employee Health and Wellness Fair that we are having on October 3rd. It will we will have it out front. We have, I think, now we're up to like 27 tables that we will have set up. We will have the vendors that provide all of our different benefits. Our employees will be able to talk to members from Delta Dental, Anthem, all of our different providers. We also have tables. Our employees are also going to be providing information from public health. IT is going to have a table for computer wellness. All kinds of information will be available. We also will be having lunch provided at noon, and so we are hoping that all of you will come join us this year. It is a great way to get information on the benefits that are available to all of the employees, and we're hoping everybody will have fun. We're going to have demos available for yoga, high-intensity training, or high-intensity interval training, and just all kinds of fun, and also learning about your benefits.
What time?
It will be going on from 11 to 3. And then we will also be having from our library, they will be demoing the virtual reality and also the 3D machine.
Perhaps you can partner with Kristen and have flu shots available there also.
We'll see if we can get that taken care of. Yeah, we're going to have, and also Mark Twain will be over here to take your blood pressure and hand out T-shirts. All right. So 11 to 3.
Thank you, Judy. Other announcements from staff? Seeing none, we'll report out on closed session.
Report of today's closed session. Conference with labor negotiator pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6. Closed session with County Designated Labor Negotiator Che I. Johnson regarding Employee Organization Service Employees International Union. There was no reportable action taken.
Thank you very much. Recognitions and acknowledgement.
Item number 2 is from the Administrative Office to proclaim the week of September 17th through 23rd, 2019 as Constitution Week in Calaveras County.
Supervisor Toffenali.
Yes, and normally when we do this, Al Segalia is here, and we normally present this to Al. He's not here this morning. So I will read this, and then I guess I will randomly choose somebody from the audience to accept this proclamation. Maybe even somebody from up here at the dais. Anyway, this is a proclamation recognizing September 17th through 23rd, 2019 as Constitution Week in Calaveras County. And yesterday was the 23rd that ended it, so we're about a day behind here. Whereas it is the privilege and duty of the American people to commemorate the 232nd anniversary of the drafting of the Constitution of the United States of America with appropriate ceremonies and activities. And whereas Public Law 915 guarantees the issuing of a proclamation each year by the President of the United States of America designating September 17th through 23rd as Constitution Week. So with that, so we should open it up for public comment.
Is there any public comment on this item?
On this item?
This item, Constitution Week.
Vicki Reinke. I just want to make a quick comment on how important our Constitution is to how our country survives. And I would like to encourage you as Board of Supervisors to encourage our school systems to teach that Constitution to our children and to make sure they understand why it was developed and what it means to keeping a nation of freedom. Thank you.
My name is Virginia Franklin, District 2, and I'd like to read the 14th Amendment. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Now, I came to you, Mr. Garamendi, and that was over 2 months ago. You've never responded, and it's absolutely a matter of due process. I would like you to follow up on that, but I would also like Mr. Stopper, because you are the only person that I've seen up here so far who stands up to these departments, who lay waste to the citizens of this county without any due process. And your suggestion that you made last week about the cannabis committee or department, I'm an absolute anti-cannabis person. I shut down some people on my property who were trying to grow. I can show you things that the planning department did and the sheriff's department that will almost guarantee that you'll get that, because they cannot run it without violating the Constitution. And they do it with malice aforethought. They do it without, on purpose. So I think we should instill the Constitution back into this county, and I would like to have due process. And if you could help me get that, I'll bring you all of my evidence, all of my information, and just ask you to look at it and determine for yourself whether you think it should go further. Thank you.
Other public comment on the Constitution Week? Will?
I'm Will Moore from Rancho Calaveras. Have a few comments about the Constitution here. Greetings, Honorable Board of Supervisors. Thank you for declaring September 17th through 23rd Constitution Week in Calaveras County. It's important to remind people now and then what its purpose is. The Preamble to the United States Constitution is a brief introductory statement of the government's fundamental purposes and guiding principles. This is the preamble. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessing of liberty to ourselves, our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1. The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes. Article 1 defines duties of Congress. Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, impose excises, and to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. Clause 2, to borrow money on the good credit of the United States. Here's a quotation from Oliver Wendell Holmes. It says, taxes are the price we pay for a civilized society. Here's a quotation from Grover Norquist, Starve the Beast. We're not trying to destroy the government, we're merely trying to shrink it down so we can drown it in a bathtub. A large number of members of the United States Congress have signed on to Mr. Norquist's no tax pledge. We're a civilized society. There's a general welfare clause in our Constitution. Government is the means by which we, the people, combine our powers and resources to provide for the general welfare. We pay for it by collecting taxes. Some members of the Congress of the United States, under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1, fulfill their constitutional mandate to provide for the general welfare by collecting taxes. They're called tax and spend Democrats. Other members of Congress, under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 2, prefer to borrow money, pay the bills for the United States government, and so forth, and provide for the general welfare. They're the self-proclaimed party of fiscal responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further public comment on Constitution Week? Al?
I'm glad I made it in time. Al Segala, Taxpayer Association, and our group has been a strong promoter of the Constitution because we think this is going to bring happiness not only to ourselves but also to our kids and their kids and their kids in the future if we can only learn the principles and then teach those principles to our youth. And so in that way, we've been promoting this little booklet called The Constitution and Fascinating Facts About It. It's a fun book to read. The Constitution is not fun to read, but it's important to read. And in this case, we got a chance to read the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and also the Articles of Confederation. Also, the 20 key or most important Supreme Court decisions are in this book too. There's attorneys that use this book for a reference manual. Anyway, so we like to provide these to anyone who would read them, and they're right here on the lectern. The purpose of the Constitution is basically to follow a new concept, and that new concept was discovered over 200 years ago, and that concept holds that people have natural rights. Some people call that natural right theory. But these natural rights are spelled out in the Constitution in Article 5 and 14 as the rights to life, liberty, and property. It's very important because this is so fundamental to everything government does. If government can protect those rights, the chances of having some bad consequences are a lot less. But when government ignores these rights, we have people that are kicked out of homes, their property's confiscated. So we recommend, it would be too much to ask that people could have a badge saying they've taken a constitutional course. And then those that don't wear the badge, we assume that they're not knowledgeable of the Constitution. That would be an imposition on their freedoms, and so it would be an oxymoron to do that. So there will be no badges to wear saying that you understand the Constitution, but we think you ought to do that. You ought to take the courses and read this little book, and we'll have a better tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comment on Constitution Week? Ma'am, are you waiting to come up in Constitution Week? You're on.
I'm concerned about the trucks that are hauling marijuana away from here.
Just Constitution Week?
What?
We're talking about the Constitution
Oh, I'm
Proclamation.
sorry.
Okay. Other public comment on Constitution Week? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Supervisor Mills?
I do have three thoughts on this, and that is that initially Congress was intended, and they were very careful to be sure that the congressmen were paid on a per diem basis when the country was first formed. The fear was that if they were paid a yearly wage, it would become a job. It would become a position. And they wanted our government to be a participatory form of government, which means that the average person who could be a United States congressman would serve 2 years and go home. The point is that you still had a job at home waiting for you to take care of. So having the people be the deciding factor, it's important to note that as a government, our powers are derived from the consent of the people. Those that they're the ones that make those decisions. And when you vote, that's why it's so important to understand what that means as a representative form of government, that we are representing those that have elected us to be here. No matter where you're voting for here or any other position, we are representing the whole. And so participation in the process is absolutely paramount to the success of our great nation.
Would you like to make a motion with that?
I will move this item. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will second.
Second by Supervisor Toffenelli. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Al, why don't you come on up and...
Oh, wait a minute.
I'm sorry.
Hold on.
Supervisor Toffenelli.
Therefore, be it proclaimed that the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors proclaims September 17th through 23rd, 2019 as Constitution Week in Calaveras County, passed and adopted by the Board of Supervisors of the County of Calaveras, State of California, this 24th day of September 2019. And Al, you came in late. So the fact that you came in late, I'm going to do a little bit of different change here. I'm going to give this proclamation to somebody that I've known for a number of years. Quite a few years, as a matter of fact. We don't always see eye to eye, but he's a good person. We get along, we're good friends. So, Will Moore, will you come on up here?
Come on down.
I guess I got the ring.
You sure not to be late?
Mr. Hardwood.
Yes.
Keep going, Ben. You gotta take, okay.
How about a little part of it?
Nice, okay, thanks.
I don't know if my knees would work to get back.
Thank you, Will.
And thank you very much, Supervisor Toffenelli.
You're welcome.
We'll move to general public comment. Everybody will have 3 minutes. I think everybody knows the drill.
Public
Sheriff,
comment. Any item of interest to the public that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board and is not posted on the consent or regular agendas may be addressed during the public comment period. California law prohibits the board from taking action on any matter which is not posted on the agenda unless it is determined to be an emergency by the Board of Supervisors. If public comment is completed before the 30-minute allotted time period, the board may immediately move to the next order of business. If public comment is not completed during the allotted time period, it will be continued as the last item of business in order to provide an opportunity for the remainder of comments to be heard.
I will use my discretion as chair. You will not be limited to 3 minutes, Sheriff.
Well, I'm actually not here for public comment. I made people nervous when I walk up here for public comment. I didn't get a chance at the staff. I wanted to bring back up the Comanche vehicle that did not get put into the budget, on how we can.
We have a budget item coming up later during the meeting.
Oh, do we?
So
Okay.
it can apply there, I believe, sir. That's the best
Okay.
time to address it.
It works, thank you.
All right, Brian, lead us off.
Good morning, Board. I'm Brian Smith from West Point. This is about the proposed homeless shelters in West Point. I did a survey of the businesses on Main Street of West Point. Unfortunately, my computer and my printer decided not to have conversation. So what you're stuck with is a photocopy of my field notes. Bottom line to it, there are 16 businesses on Main Street. I was able to contact 13 of those businesses. Of the 13, 1 is in favor of the proposal, 12 are against. it's pretty evident that the business community feels that this is going to be detrimental, and they don't really want it. And it's, at any rate, I haven't run out of time, Jack. I've got copies for everybody. Thank you, have a nice day.
Thank you, Brian. Sir?
Good morning, Board. Good morning, Mr. Garamendi. We've met before. I'm Craig Lafargue. Do I give this to anybody? So I'm here before the Board to talk about an issue on our property. We live at 2468 North Railroad Flat Road in Wilsonville, where Railroad Flat Road crosses the Licking Fork. And the concern is regarding the second potential mudslide that could occur this year after the one that occurred last year. We bought the house and property in 2005. It's seen lots of rain and not so much rain, with nary a problem of mudslides. In the spring following the Butte fire, there was a CAL FIRE bulldozer that went into the hillside to create a fire break to stop the spread of fire should one occur after. While I appreciate CAL FIRE's diligence, we ran into perhaps the law of unintended consequences. Last year, we had an atmospheric river of rain, which I'm told dropped over 10 inches of rain over a 6-hour period. That rain, which we think combined with CAL FIRE fire break, caused erosion, resulting in significant mudslide, causing our portion of Railroad Flat to be closed. Not only was the road closed, but a significant amount of mud entered our property and covered our patio with a layer of mud about a half-inch thick. I realize we got away luckier than a lot of other people. The county did come and clear the road, pushing the debris over to our property. The debris remains today where it was deposited by the county. The issue isn't so much CAL FIRE. The issue is the mountainside is still eroded. No repairs have been made by the county. Since the previously eroded channels still remain, our fear is it will be easier for a mudslide to occur again, as there's no resistance in place to stop the water from further eroding and deepening the existing trenches, thus allowing more rock and trees, etc., to come down on the road. Since we have received no assistance from the county, I've begun to dig trenches to funnel the water and mud to the road. However, I'm not a soil engineer. My background's organizational psychology, so I don't know much about digging, except into human brains, perhaps. So I don't know how effective my work will be, or even if it will create a larger problem due to my experience. We need a county soil engineer, our hydrologist, or someone who knows this, to review the damage and make recommendations to the county to repair and ameliorate damage from last year's erosion in order to prevent a larger mudslide this year. This could mean the county create a system of ditches, obstacles, or whatever you think needs to be done so we don't have another mudslide. We also request the county remove the debris on our property from last year's slide. This needs to be done this year before the rains begin.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Franklin?
Virginia Franklin, District 2. Off of Jesus Marie, where Hoover Road meets it, there's a series of culverts, probably 4 or 5 feet tall, that have been covered with concrete as a bridge. And after the Butte fire, we had a lot of flooding and so on and so forth, and it eroded a hole in the center of the bridge, which exposed the culverts. People have driven over it and now broken the culverts, and they're sticking up like this, like knife blades. You have to, if you don't know it's there, you'll run right over the top of it. They've come out and they've piled rocks on it and stuff over the years, but it just gets washed away with the rains. And so, I think they could just take a load of concrete or something and just dump it in that hole, and at least you wouldn't be driving over big knife blades. But it's kind of like, been there since 2015, and it would be nice if somebody would attend to it, because that is a main thoroughfare from San Andreas to McCollum Hill. So if somebody could, put a bug in somebody's ear, that would be great. Thank you.
Next speaker.
Good morning, Vicki Reinke. I just wanted to ask a question about the general plan. I was gone for the month of September, as you noticed, I wasn't here. And I thought the general plan was coming back, is it? I thought the general plan was coming back in September, and I have not seen that. I know at your July 16th meeting, when you talked about your goals and priorities, it was very clearly stated by, I believe, all of you that the general plan was the main priority to get that finalized. I know July 30th and 31st you reviewed it, you made some changes, and it was to come back to you for final approval. So I know I was sort of instructed that I should go through my supervisor to have this kind of thing asked. So Dennis, I would hope that you could ask today for that information so that the public is aware when that general plan is going to come back and for final approval. Thank you.
I'm concerned about the trucks hauling marijuana out of Calaveras County. They were not going to the dump. I am concerned that the raids that they've made on marijuana, that people have not been arrested that were growing it. And so they just go over to another grower and help him out, or her. And I don't understand the reasoning. I don't understand that why now there's a lot of raids on the marijuana when it's been growing for months. And I'm concerned that this money is going to campaigns for, like Hillary Clinton, who received $22 million from a party. He's in the business of marijuana, among many other things. And so this thing's connecting the dots for me is that marijuana is being used to fund progressive liberal campaigns. And I find this very difficult to accept. On the general plan, I do not feel that trees have been addressed in any means whatsoever. There's no plans of planting more trees. There's no plans of trying to save the trees that we have, and including stealing the groundwater that they rely on for growing pot. Thank you.
I'm Will Moore in Rancho Calaveras, and just add a comment to the Constitution discussion. Seems to me that in our culture, overall, there's a lot of emphasis on our rights under the Constitution, and too little emphasis on our responsibilities. Their citizen responsibilities include, paying for the thing, among others. And I don't know, I haven't been in school for a long time, but I think they've stopped teaching civics in school. And if they have, in Calaveras County, stopped teaching civics, they should get back to it. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm not used to this kind of speaking, so if I ramble on and you have a question, just stop me because I can get carried away. Anyway, I'm Dave. I'm married. This is Dave Wagner, and we live in Arnold, and you've probably heard of us before. We're at 1822 Fernway, which had a huge flood in the February, the Valentine storm or whatever they called it. Anyway, and we filed a claim because about 100 feet from our lower driveway where all the flooding occurred was a plug culvert. And I know we have talked about this, Marita, and we have discussed this, and it's went through the claim and everything. Diane's had something to do with it. But that's neither here nor there right now. What we're concerned about, it was $5,000, which we haven't. It washed out soil on our lot. We had just put a new fence up. It had washed out all the soil under those. So we have these big concrete things that the posts were in, and they're about that far out of the ground. So we need to repair that. But my concern right now is who's responsible? What's my responsibility to keep our property safe? What's your responsibility and the Roadworks' responsibility to keep our property? We can't keep putting $5,000 into it every spring. So right now, I guess that's my main question. You can go up our street, which is on Fernway. At the top of the street, there's down trees where it has been there, not like yesterday or last week. It was probably at least a month ago when these trees were cut down. They're blocking the gutter that runs alongside the street. So when the rains come, that water's all going to run across Fernway down into our driveway again. Then you go down the street where the original culvert was, and I have pictures I've taken because I think they're really important. There's a dead tree. Somebody came to cut trees down about a month ago. I says, when are you going to get that dead tree? Oh, we'll be back next week. Haven't heard of it. But it drops all this stuff right there into the culvert that gets plugged that caused the original flood. So I guess I just want to know, what's my responsibility? How can I keep my property safe without you guys working with us? That's my question.
Ma'am, normally we do not respond to questions in this forum.
Okay.
So I'm sure you could get with staff and supervisor afterwards. I know this is the first time I've seen you testify here, so
Yeah,
that's the way we do it.
That's right, yeah, but we did send the claim and everything. I've got all the pictures, all the paperwork, if that interests you. But that's my question. So if somehow or another we can get that answer. It's not just my question. I mean, there's lots of other people that have had the same problem we have. And it's the weather, it's an act of God and all this crap, sorry. But it's just not right for us to have to suffer because the county runs a plugged up culvert that runs under the street through our property. So if somebody could get back with me on that, with an answer on that, I would really appreciate it. Maria, thank you for your time and talking to us in the library in Arnold and stuff. But if you could get back with us, Marita, that would be great. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much. For the public comment, Chief, welcome back.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Board of Supervisors. Thank you for the welcome back. While I was away, it came to my attention that there was a conversation in regards to cannabis and possibly giving out badges. If I'm incorrect, I'll sit down. If I'm not, I'd like to share my few comments on that. I wear this badge. It's honor, duty, sacrifice. It's a coveted symbol, but more importantly, I don't wear it to demand respect. I have to earn my respect. I had to raise my right hand and take an oath to get it. But I wear the badge for police, fire, correctional officers, anybody that died in the line of duty. We have memorials in Washington. We have them in California. We have them in Colorado. And there's a lot of different ways to recognize people that if they need to get across the line. But for me, a badge to give to just anybody is not correct. It's not right. I would hate to see that. I have seen people flashing. I could be wrong about this. I just want to give you my 2 cents. Am I wrong? Yes. Okay. I'll sit down. No, there's no badges being given out to... Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Franklin, you've already done public comment? No?
No,
I did
No.
a second one.
Yeah.
You can only do one public comment?
You did public comment on
I'll
Harbor
be
Road.
back next week.
Very well. Is there any further public comment? Seeing none, we will move on to the consent agenda. I understand that we want to move number 7, wants to be pulled from the consent agenda?
We'll bring it back.
Okay. I'm sorry. Madam Clerk, I jumped ahead.
Consent agenda items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. They will be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member, staff member, or interested party may request removal of an item from the consent agenda for later discussion.
All right. Number 7 has been pulled by the CAO to be returned at a later date. Supervisor Mills, is there
I
anything you'd
was-
like to pull?
I was going to pull 7, but thank you. 8 and 9.
Other items from the board? Staff?
Catching up with you.
Public? Seeing none, I will seek a motion for the remainder.
So moved, sir.
Moved by Supervisor Stopper. Is there a
Second.
Second by Supervisor Toffenelli. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0.
Item 8 is from Human Services to authorize the board chair to sign an agreement with Calaveras County Office of Education for the provision of the independent living program in an amount not to exceed $80,000 for the period of July 1, 2019 through June 30th, 2020.
Mr. Alt, do you want to?
Well, actually, it's...
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
We'll turn around. Give us what your question.
Actually, 8 and 9 both work together, and no, I did not contact Kristen on these. I did contact staff, though. My concern on page 93, is it page 93 or 94? Page 94, on item number 8, calls for an execution of this agreement on the 9th day of August. Being that this is the 24th of September and there's no signature by our board chair, I just expressed some concern that we are entering into an agreement that's post-dated or predated, however you want to put it. Usually when you sign a contract, you sign it and agree to it on the date to which everybody agrees. And at this point, this board has not moved to agree to this unless it does it today, at which point that date should read the 24th of September and not the 9th of August.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Kristen Stranger, Health and Human Services Agency. So agreed, it is a priority of ours to execute all contracts in anticipation, in advance of the start date. That being said, we have been down one staff member, so we are processing all of the 200 contracts and monitoring them with one person, and really only half of that time, just given staffing concerns. We have processed the bulk of our contracts in advance, but there are a couple of them, this being one that we're a little behind. So for that, apologies, but we are just about done with any of the backdated ones.
I didn't mean to
No,
blindside
that's
you with it.
okay.
I was just, that and item number 9 kind of follow in the same way.
No, agreed.
If we date these the 9th of August, what effect does that have on your contract? Or is there any negative effects to moving it to September 24th?
So there is negative effects in the sense that for brand-new contracts that have new service agreements, that would be a much more of a concern for us. For ones that are ongoing, which these are continued from year to year, in order to not disrupt service, we would prefer that the board would execute them with a backdated date. Because again, these are not brand-new service contracts with new scopes of work or anything. They're continuations of existing work.
That just my opinion singularly,
Yeah, okay.
as not opinion of the board, is then the goal should be to bring these contracts forward to us in a timely manner so that we are not talking about it today, we're talking about it on the date or before the date that you need that agreement done.
100% agreed, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any public comment on item 8? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Further discussion or a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Supervisor Stopper, second by Supervisor Mills. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Number 9.
Item 9 is from Behavioral Health Services Substance Abuse Program. Authorize the board chair to sign an agreement with Calaveras County Office of Education for the provision of the Friday Night Live Mentoring and Youth Leadership Program in an amount not to exceed $100,000 for the period of July 1, 2019 through June 30th, 2020.
Supervisor Mills?
Yes, the same comments of the discussion of item number 8 would apply to item number 9, so having had the discussion already, I would simply move the item unless any other member would like to discuss it.
Mr. Chair, can we have a public comment?
Yeah, we're going to do public comment. Is there public comment on item 9?
Thank you.
Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. You have a motion by Supervisor Mills.
Second.
Second by Supervisor Toffenelli. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. All right.
Item number 18 is from Public Works to introduce and waive first reading and authorize the summary publication of an ordinance amending Chapter 13.01 of the Calaveras County Municipal Code, the Stormwater Quality Ordinance.
Thank you. Mr. Pack, do you need a second to set up, or you already set? Okay.
Wait a minute, it says no PowerPoint presentation on.
None. I'm not going to do one today. All right. So good morning, Chair and members of the board. My name is Joshua Pack. I'm your Director of Public Works. With me here is Robert Pattinger, our Deputy Director of Public Works and County Surveyor. Today we're asking you, we're recommending to introduce, waive first reading, and authorize the summary publication of an ordinance amending Chapter 13.01 of the Calaveras County Municipal Code, the Stormwater Quality Ordinance. So the county originally adopted a stormwater ordinance in November 2017. Over the past 12 years, the state has made a number of changes to that plan, requiring us to update and amend the ordinance to reflect current policies and procedures. We have provided documentation outlining the summary of those in your board packet and will be in the attached documents. And the ordinance is not only available for download on the Public Works website, we will also be publishing this in accordance with state law and for public review with the Valley Spring News beginning September 25th. The plan will be bringing the updated ordinance to you for the second reading 30 days later, then it will be adopted as law. So Robert is here to answer any technical questions relating to this item. I have nothing else to add, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Supervisor Stopper?
The laws are continually changing in the State Water Resources Control Board, so this is to bring it up to date so that it's in compliance with state law as well as, addressing more issues as they come forward throughout the years here in Calaveras County, correct?
Correct.
Right. That's the way I understand it. And I read through it just because these type of permitting schedules and everything with State Water Resources Control Board are my interest, and good job so far.
Supervisor Mills?
Yes, thank you for highlighting the changes. You know, we could have done it through red line or whatever, but being able to see the changes exactly as you had them was, and I will tell you, this was very timely because of the amount of time that we spent over at the Irwin in Tuolumne County, just within the last 2 weeks discussing this very issue with Tuolumne County and also the Irwin with the water districts, et cetera. So everybody is in this and getting their management plans updated, and all seem to be doing it at the same time, which is very cool to see that level of cooperation. I hope that Tuolumne County has looked, or the Irwin has looked at what you've put together here, and I've recommended that he do that, be sure that they haven't missed anything in their discussion as well. And if there's a chance to have some feedback about those pieces, hopefully there will be an ongoing conversation between our neighboring counties and ourselves so that we are sure that we're all on the same page in how we're handling this particular plan.
Yeah. I can speak to that. So I do coordinate with our regional partners. As a matter of fact, tomorrow I'm going out to Tuolumne to meet with their Director of Public Works, so it's a great timing to bring this up to let them know that we've done this, and they've got a strong staff down there as well, and we do a little bit of collaboration here or there as necessary, so that'll be a good opportunity to bring that up.
Appreciate it.
Further questions from the board? Supervisor Toffenelli?
Yeah. I have a business in Stockton, and we're required yearly to update our stormwater drain plan, which includes the amount of runoff, where it's coming from, and so forth. And this is what this plan is geared towards. When you come in and want to file a permit to build something, you have to address the runoff. So I'm assuming, though, that bringing up what Ben said, we are working closely with CCWD or other entities that deal with taking on the runoff water into their facilities and dealing with it, that this plan applies to them also?
This plan applies mostly to development. This plan applies to development within the county.
Yeah.
CCWD would be required to have their own permit as a utility.
They do. Yes. They do.
Okay. I'm sorry, in compliance with our runoff plan?
Yes.
Yeah,
that has to
okay, that's what I was
happen.
asking more or less. We work in conjunction with them to make sure that when somebody develops or somebody builds something new, the storm runoff water is in compliance through them, since if it is involving them, that everything is in place and all current state laws are being followed.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And every time that they have a project, we have to check their plans also.
That was my question.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back for the board for further discussion or a motion.
So moved, sir.
Moved by Supervisor Stopper,
Second.
second by Supervisor Toffenelli. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you, gentlemen, very much. Do we need to set up for, do you need a second setup, Sean? It'll take 5 minutes. Back at 10 o'clock. Welcome back to the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors meeting. We are on item 19.
19 is from the Office of Emergency Services to adopt a resolution approving the 2019 Calaveras County Emergency Operations Plan.
Good morning, Supervisors. Thank you for your time this morning. The item is for the Emergency Operations Plan. I have a brief overview of the plan. It's 264 pages long, so hopefully I won't be that long-winded about it, but if you have any questions, we can certainly entertain them. This base plan is an update from the 2015/16 plan. FEMA and the Department of Homeland Security recommends that we review this every 3 years. We are actually somewhat on time to do that. The plan that you see before you has been reviewed both by an outside agency, a consulting firm, as well as been walked over through the state OES. It's called a crosswalk, and it's just kind of a checklist to ensure that the necessary things to meet state requirements are there. The plan itself follows the National Response Framework approach, and that's part of the larger scale. From our perspective, we sit kind of in the middle between the local districts and entities. We're the county, above us is the state, and the federal side of things. So the National Response Framework is the federal level approach. The advantage of having the National Response Framework approach is that when we plug into the state and federal approaches, ours fits in rather seamlessly. So the plan itself, it begins with an overview of the county and a brief description of both the unincorporated and incorporated areas. And that's basically sections 1 through 3. Section 4 describes the threats facing the county. That threat analysis, or the THERA, is conducted every year. And the emergency operations plan shows the typical threats that face our county. Section 5 is the concept of operations, and that describes the disaster declaration process,
the 4 phases of emergency management, consideration for access and functional needs in our planning, and a brief overview of our continuity of operations planning. Section 6 discusses the county's adoption of ICS, or the Incident Command System, and the Emergency Support Function Organization, activation levels, and the triggering events for each of those. A note about emergency support functions. Those are organizational areas that deal with particular tasks or supports during times of emergency, like law, fire, finance, those kinds of things. Section 7 is a continuation of the Incident Command and moving into SEMS, which is the State Emergency Management System. Sorry for all the acronyms. The federal government loves them. NIMS, which is the National Incident Management System, and the mutual aid participation. Mutual aid, of course, is when we reach out to our neighbors and ask for help. Section 8 is information and collection as well as dissemination. It is required by the Federal Homeland Security Administration. Section 9 deals primarily with public information and communication, what sources of communication and dissemination that we're going to use, and the activation of a joint information center. The joint information center is if we have more than one public outlet for information, say there's a PIO from Public Works or HHSA, we can combine those into a single place for information. Section 10 discusses record-keeping requirements, documentation, logistics, and transition into recovery. Section 11 is the administration portion that talks about plan development and maintenance. Section 12 is the authorities and references section. 13 is a glossary. 14 is the crosswalk that I spoke of earlier, and shows that where each one of those ESF or emergency support functions and whose primary responsibility is it. And then section 15 is the crosswalk that I spoke, that is kind of the checklist to make sure that we are in compliance or work well with the federal and state partners. And your guys' favorite part, questions.
Questions from the board?
I asked John most of my questions already.
Supervisor Mills?
John, could you go back to page 31? It's on 299 of our packet. We identify for flooding purposes the watersheds and waterways. I did not notice the McCollum South Fork on there at all. Did I miss something?
I'm sorry,
Page
31?
Page 31 of the plan. Almost there. Okay, right there. On flooding, now keep going down. The listing of the waterways and watersheds, the middle fork of the south fork of the McCollum is not listed.
We could certainly add that. I am not completely sure why that's not there.
Mike?
None of the McCollum is listed there.
No, I just,
But
the south fork is the most important piece for us.
it's
And then I have one more on the next page, on page 32, regarding dam failures, and page 33, it continues with dam failures it goes through a listing of all of the various dams or potential dams within the county, but there is no listing on New Maloney's. I know that Drew Lazar with the Bureau of Reclamation has a very good inundation map and plan that might be inserted here. And likewise, we should be asking Tridam for their same mapping and work done on Lake Tulloch.
We actually do not insert
those plans into this general plan.
But just to mention those.
Yeah, we keep copies of their plans and
Yeah.
cross-reference.
It's just not mentioned here,
Okay.
so I would like to be sure that those two are added in for the dam or dam failures.
Okay, I can certainly do that.
Okay. Okay, one other thing, hazard mitigation plan, how does that fit? How does that parallel with what you've got here?
The hazard mitigation plan is the front end of our mitigation portion, which is the first part of the four sections that we work in. We have submitted a notice of interest to seek a grant to conduct a new hazard mitigation plan. And actually, we are partnering with the city of Angels Camp to write a multi-hazard mitigation plan. So what that means is instead of just planning for the county itself, we're going to partner with the city and plan with them as well, and that's the multi-part.
I know that there was also recently a grant last year for CCWD to complete an update on their hazard mitigation plan. And there were other water sewer agencies that wanted to piggyback on that, but were not able to. I would hope that we would reach out to them as well, so that they are included in that discussion.
Yes, sir. In the building of that plan, we will invite all of our stakeholders to be a part of that, and they are more aware of their specific hazards, so we
Okay.
would want to seek that information out.
Yeah. I know CCWD did adopt theirs just recently, so it's current. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sure, it's Toffenelli.
Yes, John, can you go to page 99? Record-keeping requirements?
Okay, 99?
Mm-hmm. Okay, given the fact that we have some issues with the Butte fire and even some winter storm issues, and also the dead tree issue, tree mortality, in trying to recover funds from the federal government and from the state, this issue, this particular section deals with that. And if you read this, again, we get into language issues, much like we do with ordinances or contracts. The first 6 bullet points on this says should. And in my opinion, it should say shall. Because should means what? It could mean anything, just should. You should have done that. And if shall is in there, at least the verbiage is there, this is what you shall do, so we can recover the funds that we are expending. If you go down further after the 6th bullet point, it starts saying must. So it kind of stands out here what you should do about record keeping, then at the end, you must do this. So in my opinion, again, the verbiage should at least say shall, not should. I don't know how the rest of the board feels about that.
I would like to elaborate on that, but yes, I agree.
And that's the only point, other than Dennis's point, that's the only point I had after reading all this, was the verbiage on page 99. Given the situations that we have, and we all know, and we're going to be addressing some of those in the budget hearings when we got coming up later this afternoon. So.
And the primary difference between should and shall is some of them are absolutely necessary for the operational period that we face, and some of them are shoulds that may not be things that we can accomplish during an emergency, would be the primary difference. In a perfect world, we would love to separate and segregate our normal operating expenses from our emergency expenses, but in an emergency with limited staffing and depending on the situation at hand, we may not be able to fully do that at that time. Hopefully we'll be able
Well,
to.
and I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
But as we expend the finances, the record keeping is very vital in order for us to not have to write off the money that we're being asked to here coming up in this afternoon, so.
I completely agree, and one of the ideas behind Section 10 is that, and as an umbrella, the whole plan is that to avoid what took place in the specific instance that's brought up, the Butte fire, is that we begin thinking about these things beforehand rather than after, and that will help us bridge the gap between when an incident begins and when we begin record keeping. The sooner that we start discussing and actually keeping and performing those record keeping functions is the critical time gap where a lot of that information was lost and tends to get lost. So the idea behind it is that we're front loading that now to avoid that from happening.
If, I was reading through this and I didn't catch the should and shall thing so much as a way to address that issue through the time card and putting forward a project code for emergencies that specifically when, I understand when people are out, they're running, they're doing their time and everything, but with other jobs I've had in the past, we have different project codes for our time cards. And when I'm working on one thing, money from that certain thing has to go towards that thing, especially if it's restricted funds. And that's how you separate, like, let's say a general fund from a restricted fund or from applying it to emergency. So I know some departments keep better track of what hours they go through, they apply to certain things, and other departments aren't so structured. So requiring the county to have that structure prior to an event such as this would help facilitate being able to track those when it comes to salaries. The other thing is setting an org key aside because, with salaries comes the use of vehicles and fuel, for example, and supplies. So having a separate org key that applies directly to disasters as people start going forward, and then that way when they go and fill up their vehicle, you keep a track in your logbook inside your vehicle that this went to this thing, and that could be part of your structure here, or some of your bullet points is on how to put in the controls and be able to track the money properly. Just, it's been brought up before, but hasn't necessarily been applied.
Sure. I want to add just a little bit to that. Ben's correct. We should have an applicable key or code that we use, and once you go on to whatever you're doing, it has to do with emergency, that's what you log on your time cards. The other portion of this too is a lot of the cost recovery that we could be losing also has to do with the subcontractors we contracted out to do the work, and them at the initial stages, them not keeping track accurately enough for us to recover. So I think what needs to be looked at is when we get somebody out there to do the recovery part after disasters happen, that we have what we call a disaster contract that spells out exactly what they're supposed to do, and in keeping track of everything that they've done, the hours, the equipment, whatever they're back charging to us to pay at that time. I mean, those contracts are very vital in order for us to recover, make sure that they're doing everything that we need to get money recovered from FEMA and state. So.
Thank you very much, Gary. We have a lot of really good points here. Some of these apply to a plan. Some of these apply to perhaps a potential policy on how we, specifically tracking time. All those are important policy questions that we should take on. But if there's no other questions from the board, let me ask if there are any questions. I'm sorry, Supervisor Callaway?
Is the overall overseer of all of the time cards with documentation, is that going to be your department, or is that going to be in the auditor's office? I wasn't really clear. It sounded like it was through your department, and then, go ahead.
Bless you.
Thank you.
So.
Oh, you
so,
weren't talking to me about the
the finance section, once we begin an incident and we stand up the EOC and start using the incident command system, there's 5 branches. There's actually a finance section whose charge is solely documentation and tracking of the financial end of the emergency. That would be under the overall incident command structure, which may be run by myself, it may be run by the sheriff, it may be run by a team of incident commanders, but that logistical or that finance section would most likely be headed by someone either from the auditor's office or the CAO's office, like our budgetary deputy CAO, or even depending on who's available at the time. In my mind, the most applicable person who has the most budget knowledge in how we budget and practice and procure would be the person that I would want in charge of that.
Okay, I agree with that. So an incident happens and the sheriff is the incident commander, the person then is under the sheriff, and then when we sort of move from the incident itself into recovery, the person then moves to you. I mean, their job, their responsibility is the same. It's collecting all the time cards or what have you.
It is, and so what happens is there's the incident commander, and it can be, like I said, it could be myself, it could be the sheriff, it could be anybody. And then as the incident begins to shrink in its footprint and we collapse the operations sections and some of the other sections, the people that are in charge of those sections need to take their documentation, their logs, they submit them to the finance section, and when the finance section collapses and turns it over to recovery, they take those logs and information and they turn it over to the recovery team, which would be us, which would be primarily my office, yes. Sorry for the complicated answer.
No, I mean, it's not complicated, it just, you have someone,
The point to the incident command system is that all incidents are unique, and you may have a different team each time an incident starts. And so you have trained people in all of the sections, and it's not always a person who has a fiscal background. It may not be. In some cases, it may be somebody that's just trained in the fiscal section, and they're a fiscal person for purposes of that particular incident, and they coordinate all those efforts. Ultimately, those would go through our office to complete the throughput on that to make sure we follow all the recovery. One of our big problems in the Butte fire, and not to cast a shadow on that, but we recognize there was issues with that. We haven't had effective incident command training, NIMS and SIMS training, so that we have all of those sections filled out with personnel, for lack of a better term. So and John already has this as part of his goal setting, or in our goal setting, that we will do that training, and we'll have trained qualified people in all sections. So when we have to stand up the EOC, we'll be able to go to a pool of people basically to act in those various roles. And so it's a bit bureaucratic because it's designed by the state, and it's for the purposes of, even if we get called out on a mutual aid, that we can go to an incident and be able to say, oh, well, I'm trained in a particular area, and I can be plugged in on an incident in that particular area. And I know our fire chief that's here today, he was just up on an incident, and maybe he can speak more to it. But it's intended to be plug and play, so you're not always just asking for an accountant to do the paperwork on time cards and time tracking and whatnot when there's an incident.
But I think the issue that my colleagues brought up is that we, on the financial part, not who's in charge, and I don't think that's it, and just listening to them, And it's, where is that paper trail? Who is responsible? How is it being followed? So when we go to submit reimbursement, if we're entitled, then we have it. That's, and it's not all the stuff you talked about. I just was talking about the financial portion.
The real simple step is whoever the financial person is assigned in the incident would handle at time of incident. And then all of that documentation would come to the CAO's office, whether it's OES or our office, for us to process it through.
Okay, and I have one more. Page 112. Can't find it now. The volunteer organizations. I'm not gonna,
You want my copy?
I'm not going through it because I remember it. There's
Right here.
two questions. Oh, thank you, I'll use this. Under 10.10, there's nothing in there about animals. And if something could be added, Humane Society, Focus, Animal Search and Rescue. I mean, it has its own life, and we usually use the fairground, but, so, and VOAD, I am not clear what they do. Are they totally responsible, from what I'm hearing, from calling out volunteers? So I just was asking them on that.
Okay, so two parts to that question. The first one is, these are some examples. They're absolutely not a conclusive.
I saw that it was some.
And then the Central Sierra VOAD, which is volunteers active in disasters, or volunteer organizations active in disasters, they may be tasked with coordinating our volunteer efforts. One of the things, it's an absolutely great problem to have, is one of the things that we have run across in the past with disasters, and I've seen in other areas, is you get this wave of donations and volunteer help, and it really just runs right over the top of you if you don't have someone who's minding that. And so it may be the Central Sierra VOAD that we choose to do that. It may be someone from the administration office. And it may be a number of different people that we task with coordinating those efforts. Number one, for integrity of the incident, so that we don't get overrun as the county with that help. And number two, that we accept that help in a way that we can put it to its best use. And that really is meant to have, so that we can, in saying that, to coordinate that volunteer help that we get in a manner that puts it back to work. Does that help at all?
VOAD actually was here in 17. I don't think you and Ben were here at the time, and gave us a presentation on exactly what they do and what they did during Butte Fire, and is exactly what John was saying. So maybe we can invite them back sometime and have them give another presentation.
So they're the ones that are responsible for calling out the Red Cross, setting up the shelter, evacuation shelters, making sure Health and Human Services, they call up what?
So what would happen typically in an incident, and really the incident command structure is meant to be used on everything from a single structure fire that may be over in just a few hours to something as large as Hurricane Katrina. And so those 5 sections that are listed don't change. The operations section, the logistics section. So the logistics section would be in charge of planning and executing the logistical needs of the incident. The planning section would be in charge of planning it.
Those are all inputs that you talked about, getting the Red Cross and getting those people in. Those would all be parts of their job to plan and execute that during an incident, no matter how little or how big. Believe it or not, the American Red Cross, if there was a structure fire today and we had a family displaced of 4 or 5 people, we could reach out to them and they would provide assistance on that small of a level, but they also provide help during like the Butte fire incidences.
Thank
If-
you.
Supervisor Stopper?
To answer the VOAG question you had, is there kind of the filter of, like, let's say, the regular citizen that wants to come in and volunteer their time? They are part of organizing that when it comes to donations and people that just come out of the woodwork. And I think a lot of this applies to the initial response, which a majority of the time is dealt with by the Sheriff's Department. And with our experience during the Butte fire, there is a need for someone structured like VOAD or someone else, whoever it may be, so that we don't have people running lines that aren't, and there's a certain amount of liability with volunteers. And there's a certain amount of training that you're supposed to have to be able to use them. And so not everyone qualifies, so just because you have a horse trailer doesn't mean that you can enter the situation. So this will help do the filter while the initial response by, let's say, for instance, our fire departments, the Sheriff's Department and everything can do their job while they're out there and not have to worry about telling citizen one, between citizen one and someone that has actually qualified through VOAD to go out on scene.
Absolutely. The whole idea of having a volunteer coordinator or an organization like VOAD come in is we're freeing up our quarterback, the sheriff's office, and our running backs, the fire departments, to go out and do what they do best and not have to stop and be interfered with by people who have the best of intentions but are in actuality slowing down the professionals.
What does CERT do then?
CERT is the Community Emergency Response Team. They fit more into what Supervisor Stopper was just talking about. They're trained ahead of time. They're qualified ahead of time to come in and do certain functions and assist, but they're pre-flighted. They're trained and vetted ahead of time. And that's exactly what Supervisor Stopper was discussing. Not everybody can just turn up out of the woodwork and go right to work. The CERT teams are a collection of people that we can plug right in and go to work with.
Supervisor Mills?
It's almost like the more we talk, the more we show our ignorance. And I'm not going to display too much ignorance, but the ICS system is ever expanding and ever contracting as it works through. But one of the things that happens on incidents, and I know this is probably true with the Butte fire, is you have people without MOUs, people without numbers. They don't get a number, and deciding to go out and do something on their own and then expecting to be paid for it. And even the county can go horribly sideways if they're not coordinating well with whoever is in the finance section of an incident to be sure that what they're accounting for is truly applicable to that incident. And that's been one of those rubs that has occurred over and over again. So I just want to be sure to bring that in the discussion that, yeah, you might go to a larger team when you get beyond operational periods, and all of a sudden who is in finance changes. It's a different group, a bunch of people, but they still expect the same paperwork and the same level of accountability to that incident as the originals did. And they don't want to be spending their time trying to go back and forensically figure out who did what and how does it apply. So your logistics team and your finance teams have to work very closely together to be sure that when you're procuring services, that you be sure that the finance officers are aware of it and that they can properly give them the coding numbers, as Supervisor Tofinelli alluded to be sure that they are properly accounted for in the system. Because when the system starts breaking back down, we have to know they were there. Correct. As they go away. So we have to be able to check the box as they leave, just as much as we check the box when they arrive.
Correct.
So I just wanted to bring that out, that it might be one of the reasons that we're having problems with the Butte fire, is because we didn't get into it correctly and we didn't get out of it correctly.
Okay. Is there any public comment on this item? Al?
House of County Taxpayer Association. That's a good job. And it's a long read. One of the things that occurred during the fire, was told to me by a former supervisor, FEMA recommended that they confiscate private property that had been burnt. And that was turned down by a supervisor and maybe some other supervisors at that time. And it got some thinking. We learned about the Constitution just a few hours ago, and in the Constitution we found that the job of government is to protect the rights to life, liberty, and property. Okay, but nowhere could I find in these plans was a statement to that effect. And in times of emergency, sometimes some pretty tough decisions have to be made. But it seems to be a good idea to keep in mind that the purpose of government is to protect those three rights. And in emergency services, you are protecting property. And the only purpose for regulation is for public safety. It's never to try to control people or tell them what to do. So if we were to add some wording that the constitutional protections of are part of this plan, that would be a good idea. Thank you.
Okay, is there other further public comment on this item? Chief?
Second round. John, great job. And to me, you know, I've lived here 27 years. I'm not talking as a chief, I'm talking as a citizen. We've been through this, I'm going to call rodeo before, and it's going to happen again. But I think for firefighters and police, you know, I run up and down the state, and what's interesting is usually we run in and we'll put the fire out and then we go away. I did out here at the Butte. But when you leave and then the recovery part comes together or starts happening, that's when the real disaster really hits everybody. It's that long-term and trying to fund. A couple things that I just wanted to remind you what I've seen as I travel up and down, not the state of California, but the United States, because you know I told you before, a while back, FEMA, and I was on a Type 3 team, but there are Type 1 teams. Now we're down with the feds, I think almost down to 3 teams. And those are Type 1, maybe they're 4, and then you have your state teams. They have muscle memory. They do it all the time, and they train in the off season, so they're really good at what they do to build that muscle memory. As a golf swing, we talked about that before. You swing and you swing and you swing so that you practice, so when you go in front of a bunch of people, you get it right. What I see across California nations is there's EOCs, but they have dust on them. So they're there, they look great, but we don't practice that muscle memory, so when it happens, then it's everybody trying to figure out, you know, what role they're going to play, and that's always difficult. If we can remember that the EOC is at the 50,000 foot level, the IC, the Type 1 teams are going to be at the 30,000 foot level, and boots on the ground are going to be at the ground level. So we're all supporting each other. The teams coming in to run the fire, as you said, they're going to run the fire. But for me, being division out there, when I'm running it on this one particular Butte fire, there were so many burned animals that animal control couldn't take care of all. It was overwhelming. So those volunteers are incredible. Those volunteers that are actually probably helping, moving lunches on the line out there, they're incredible. No, we don't want people out there with a shovel and wanting to help the firefighters put the fire out. But there are some great support areas. But at the end of the day, where the Type 1 teams get it right is the finance part. You know, and they have forms and they have documentation that they have that muscle memory. And when we come in as a Type 3 team, I don't have what they have in that finance part. That's where the the type 1s are able to do it. So I just wanted to say, for me, living here for 27 years, we do got it right, because we do have some muscle memory on going through the whole experience and through the recovery. Some of you were here as board members when it happened. Some of us were firefighters here. But if, again, I'm doing today, I have a meeting today for active shooter. We're doing one here in the county.
Thank you, Chief.
And we're practicing it today, and we're doing our first drill on the 19th. We're going to build our muscle memory, so we're ready to go.
Thank you. All right, seeing no further public comment, I'll bring it back to the board. I want to ask you a quick question. We currently do not have a plan, correct? Or it's outdated?
It's outdated. It was adopted after the Butte fire and sometime in 2016.
Okay, so we're out of compliance, so we need to have a plan in place. We've also got a series of edits that we want to improve upon this document. Would it be better for you to bring this back in a couple weeks, or
Maybe we could just move it with the edits that we've spoken about.
are you comfortable with that, John, or with the?
Yes, sir. There's
conversation we had
actually
here?
in the maintenance section of the planned maintenance section, we would denote any changes. So this time next year, when we review the plan, if we found something that had changed, we would actually just change it, redistribute copies, and it would be documented, the changes. So I'm comfortable with making the changes that you guys have suggested and adopting.
I move we adopt this resolution as amended.
Second.
Commissioner Stopper, you had a comment? We have a first and a second on the table. We can discuss it.
Maybe, I mean, other than the comments that Supervisor Mills had made were specific to adding some rivers and such to that, but I don't think we've, other than discussing it, I don't think we've made a clear suggestion on how we want something amended when it comes to the bullet points that Mr. Tolfinelli had brought up.
Should we just take a poll if you want to change it from should to shall,
We can do
the
that.
verbiage?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll call poll on those bullet points that Supervisor Toffenali pointed out, changing from should to shall. Make it more specific. Poll the board. Supervisor Toffenali?
Yes.
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 Yes. Okay, there you go.
Those changes shall be made.
Very good.
Good point, John.
And personally, I think adding one more bullet point as it comes to either adding org keys as they apply or project codes to time cards as they apply, that would help out with this also, is my personal opinion. I'd like to pull the
I
board
sort
on.
of looked at that as kind of more of a housekeeping, an accounting issue, not part of the emergency plan. I mean, not that those suggestions aren't valid, but looked at it as how are we going to implement some in an accounting format, I mean, maybe there's a reason we can or can't or need to do it to fit in with our accounting system or our payroll system.
So the forms that we would use during an emergency would be the ICS forms. There's literally volumes of them, from request forms to timesheets to vehicle use forms. We would use those during the incident and then take those forms and dump them into our record keeping system here at the local level, because remember that it wouldn't be necessarily just a county employee or that would be using that form. It may be somebody from Tuolumne County Sheriff's Office or a fire department far, far away. They would be familiar with the ICS form that would document, like, as an example, like vehicle usage, time and stuff like that. And then part of the recovery would be taking those forms and inputting them into, say, a disaster budget or an org key.
With that understanding, I'll retract my poll.
I want to comment just on that, though. Part of the problem that we had seeking recovery in our records was, for instance, the sheriff's office. They didn't have a separate line account set up through the auditor controller to track that time and check their time off on it. So I think the timesheet thing and what Ben is saying is very valuable, that we need to set that up ahead of time now for future disasters, so it's all in place and we don't run into some of the problems we ran into with the sheriff, and he knows what we're talking about. That's where we lost recovery, because we didn't have sufficient records to turn into FEMA saying that this time was spent on that. We didn't have a separate line item set up, and I think that needs to be addressed either with the CAO, it's housekeeping like Marita says, but that is part of what needs to be done, so it's done ahead of time and everybody knows when a disaster hits what they're going to tag their time to or their equipment to or whatever, so it's set up. And a lot of our problems to recover would go away if we did that ahead of time.
The paper trail and the documentation, as Mr. Toffanelli has brought up, is crucial to justifying what we're getting back. And we understand that's the part of our hurdle, or bridging that gap today in our recovery efforts from as far back as 2015. That's why I keep bringing it up, and the issue is because that's our proper course for recovery.
Okay, I have a motion and a second on the table. I'm going to call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0.
Thank you, guys.
We're setting up, do you need to set up for budget at all? Okay. Let's take a 10-minute break and then we'll come back and start on budget. All right. Welcome back, Madam Clerk. Number 20.
Item 20 is from the Administrative Office to adopt a resolution adopting the fiscal year 2019-20 county budget for the County of Calaveras.
Thank you. Mr. Alt?
This item's before you as a result of the budget hearings on September 10th. At the conclusion of those hearings, the changes recommended or directed by the board at the time of the hearings have been incorporated into the final budget. Those changes are reflected in the staff summary that was provided to you and the public on the agenda. And at this point, we're requesting adoption of the 2019-2020 final budget.
Questions from the board? Seeing none, public comment? Sheriff?
You know, if you want to talk about that now, or if you want to talk about it with capital assets, because it's a capital asset.
Mr. Alt, what do you advise?
Capital assets? Okay.
Capital assets?
Yeah, we'll do that.
All right, very well. Any other public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back.
I'm not sure I want to talk about it because we approve capital assets, which is why it follows the approval of the budget. So if the sheriff is wanting us to make a change in the budget, shouldn't we discuss it now? Mr. Alt?
Well, I think we know what his request is going to be, whether it's under the budget discussion or capital assets. I think is 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. At the end of the day, it's going to have an impact on the budget, whether you adopt the budget now or not. Any changes after the budget hearing was concluded require a 4/5 vote. And which would be the same if you change the capital assets, would take the same vote. So I would defer to Megan if she had any comments, but I think it's immaterial at this point whether you address it here or in capital assets.
So if we discuss it now before we approve this item, then you only need 3 votes, right?
No.
Because this vote adopts the final budget. Without adopting it, we can still modify it with 3 votes? All right.
No, I don't.
I'm not dying on the vine.
No, I
I'm
think-
just thought there's a difference between 3 and 4 votes.
If there are any changes to the budget, whether it's a capital asset or otherwise, that is done outside of the budget hearing, then it would require a 4/5 vote.
So it's 4/5. I think to Marita's point, I think she's correct. If we do something in capital assets, it will affect our regular budget. So I'm guessing we probably have to take it on, at least in theory now. Or you want to switch them up?
That would solve your issue. Let's just do it. Let's switch to capital assets first and.
Let me make sure I'm not messing up the entire computer system. Megan?
When certain items are, like for instance, when we do some Williamson Act or other zoning items, we open multiple items, allow the public to talk on both because they are so intertwined that the discussion can dovetail. So one of the things that you might consider is we've opened item 20, what you can, considering the sheriff's request and it being a capital asset and the two being so intertwined, you might consider opening item 21 as well, have the discussion on both 20 and 21, allowing public comment on both, and then moving forward with a motion on each item.
That also works.
Does that work for fellow board members? Dennis, Gary, would that work for you guys? Very well, then let's read in 21 and we'll listen to them both at the same time.
Item 21 is from the Administrative Office to adopt a resolution authorizing the purchase of certain capital assets as part of the fiscal year 2019-20 county budget.
Thank you. Questions from the board on this one before we go to comment? Supervisor Mills, you got a question?
Yeah, this is just is continuing discussion of something that we had been talking about during the previous budget hearing, and then it somehow just got missed. And we're now bringing that discussion back up, is that correct? Yeah, he's shaking yes, okay. Just want to be sure. Thanks.
Okay, no questions from the board. Mr. Alt, do you have anything to add before we go to public comment?
No.
Very well, public comment, Sheriff, and I will not limit you to 3 minutes.
I do have a question, sir.
Yes, sir.
I think there's a question as to whether we're being asked to use general fund dollars or not. So I need some clarification on that.
Mr. Alt?
Because I think that was the dilemma when it was brought up before. One side was saying yes and one side was saying no. So we need some clarification if we're going to add it to this capital list, assets list.
Excuse me, Mr. Alt, do you want to?
So I don't think there's sides in the issue. We definitely want to facilitate what the sheriff's office needs. My perspective is, though, and it is with all of the budget items, when we reflect the revenue in this budget as we have, and not reflect a corresponding expenditure, if we add the expenditure in now, it ultimately affects the contingency or some other part of the budget if we don't make an offsetting adjustment somewhere else, either in the sheriff's budget or another budget. The question I think is really relevant when the undersheriff spoke to this. He mentioned that if we have the revenue, if it's specific, and it may be in the grant, and this is a question that I have, if we've been given the revenue specific for the vehicle and we don't spend it on the vehicle, then we may lose that revenue. And we'd have to take the revenue out in that case. And it's going to have an equal offsetting impact as if we add the vehicle in. One way or another, we have a disconnect between the revenue and the expenditure at this point in time. And that's all been incorporated into the final budget that was presented to you at the hearing. So one way or another, there's an impact to the budget.
So I think the answer is yes.
There's an additional impact, and this doesn't really speak to the sheriff, so I'm going to let our conversation get through there first before I go on to the other part of this, capital assets.
Very well. Sheriff, come on up. Good afternoon, Jim Macedo, Sheriff's Office. I don't have really many different comments from the last time I presented to all of you. It's a 3-year contract. It includes funding for staffing, and it includes funding for a vehicle. The money was put in for the vehicle this particular year, albeit a little late, and we have a desire to purchase the vehicle this year. We are trying to execute some cleanup
due to some ongoing problems with the inability to purchase vehicles in the same given year with which we've been given budget authorization. That's why we didn't want to wait till mid-year. That's why we brought it forward at this point in time. So this is a revenue with an offsetting expense. That's as clear as I can make it. Thank you.
Al, do you have public comment?
Yeah, Al Scala, Taxpayer Association. It seems that's important. One important thing is the timeliness of this. If this could not be done the proper way, where it's reviewed by the auditor and the CAO, and then it's a recommendation to you, and then you act on that as a line item, then we should approve it. If there's enough time to do it properly, I'd recommend doing it that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further public comment, I'll bring it back for discussion of the board. Supervisor
So-
Callaway?
So the budget was used balanced, the sheriff's department's budget was balanced based on revenue and expenses. So now if we're adding another expense that didn't get in for whatever reason, so that then changes the revenues, so would that be that we would have to, if they want this vehicle, then they're going to have to offset it somehow or another with revenue elsewhere in their department? I mean, their budget was balanced and something was forgotten, so now there is an expense they want, and they're saying they have the revenue for it, so, but we're adding an expense, so there is a disconnect. So why can't they just use, I can ask him, I'm looking at them, use that money that they say is grant to buy the vehicle, but then they're going to have to reduce an expense elsewhere in their department to keep the budget balanced. Otherwise, it's asking, if I'm hearing correctly, the general fund to make up that difference between revenue and expense.
So there are a few different ways that we can look at this and a few different scenarios. So in one scenario, the vehicle is not purchased until year 2, the revenue does not come in until year 2, and everything waits until year 2, or that fraction of whatever the grant is that's available this year for the vehicle. In another scenario, the budget remains as it currently is. There is no capital asset purchase budgeted. The Sheriff's Department doesn't expend those funds. They also don't see the corresponding revenue stream, and that would be your second scenario. And the third scenario, which is the one we're talking about here, is then whether if what the board determines to do is authorize that capital asset expenditure, we either ask that there are corresponding reductions in expenses, or whether we wish to make a general fund contribution or another reduction elsewhere in the budget, or a transfer in from another budget unit in order to cover what wasn't budgeted at final.
Got it, that's, okay, thank you.
Supervisor Toffenelli?
Yeah, so we've balanced his budget using this money, but it sounds like we used it elsewhere than what it was specifically supposed to be used for. This grant was for a vehicle. So we balanced his budget, so at some point, they're going to be giving the money back if they don't buy the vehicle because it was expended somewhere else, what it wasn't authorized to be expended on. So either way, we're looking at it, adjustment in their budget mid-year or what have you, or we backfill. And what is the number again? What's the amount?
92, I think.
$75,000 to backfill to make their balance. their budget balance. My question, I guess, is how did we expend the money in their budget when it was not earmarked for what it was supposed to be earmarked for?
So we don't expend their money.
No, we don't, but the
department.
budget came that way, expending the money other than for a vehicle, apparently.
So if you take the sheriff's office out of it and take any budget, when we get a budget submitted with revenues in it, and we have this dialogue pretty regularly with all the department heads, there are many others besides the sheriff's department that have revenue streams where we program in their anticipated revenue at the beginning of the year. We go throughout the year and those revenue streams, sometimes, in fact, we heard this at CAO recommended, and I think our former auditor spoke to it at mid-year, and then ultimately in CAO recommended. If those revenue projections don't align with the expenditures that are programmed in the budget, there's an adjustment that has to be made. So how they're speaking of it about making the car purchase, Jim's absolutely right. If they get a grant and they get a revenue stream to buy a vehicle, then they make the expenditure. What we're talking about is budget process. When we have the revenue in the budget and there wasn't a corresponding expenditure, no matter which way we go now, there's an adjustment. If that revenue was specific to the vehicle and that's all it can be used for, and they won't give us the money if we don't buy a vehicle, then we'll have to adjust the revenue down. That will ultimately affect all the rest of the budget. If we purchase the vehicle and we make the $76,000 expenditure, then that's going to cause an adjustment to the budget as well. And how we make that adjustment to the budget is really ultimately what we need the direction on. If they incorporate it, if they're expected to incorporate it in their budget and make their budget balance based on what's been submitted, then that's one way of doing it. Another way is to make a general fund contribution. And I'm not advocating one way or another. I'm suggesting that a change has to be made one way or another.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and this, again, it was overlooked. When they turned in their budget, it wasn't specifically detailed for that grant money being earmarked for a vehicle. So here we are, incorporating all their income and their expenditures, and that item was not on there, so that money was not detailed out for that.
Supervisor Stopper?
Sorry.
We were proposed three ways to deal with this. I believe there's a fourth way. The way I understand it, the sheriff's recommended budget that was presented to administration prior to was missing the expenditure but had the revenue programmed in. And at that point, that's where the oversight happened when the administration put it together into the budget. But right now, we're on year 2 of a 3-year grant. We're on year 1 or year 2 of a 3-year?
It's first
Year 1. Regardless of the situation, the way I understand it, we have to give this money back, and we're going to have to backfill that money one way or another because it's already going someplace else for the bottom line. So we, until next year, and then we get the money back, on a 3-year grant. I don't see the difference. I would move that we accept the expenditure. One way or the other, we have to make up for part of this money. There's no way around it. There's no way around it. So now or next year or the year after, I would move this year.
Supervisor Mills, you're up next.
This is like playing a game of cards. It's like I've heard a lot of different discussions here, but the grant is for a fixed amount. And whether it's expended in year 1, year 2, year 3, if you don't buy the vehicle, you're not going to get the funds for the vehicle. Therefore, it's still money sitting in the grant for future years, future expenditures, et cetera. Where did we miss here?
Okay, well, let's be clear. This is not a grant, this is a contract.
Or contract.
It's a 3-year
I'm sorry.
contract.
My apologies.
That's okay, and I think I said grant at one time too. It's a 3-year contract, and we budgeted a certain amount for each individual year. We, the sheriff's office, overlooked the vehicle at one point, but the money's there. It just, the vehicle needs to be purchased. It's not going to be an impact. It's the way the budget is designed, so that it's getting very convoluted. The money's there. The money's there it's not going to be general fund expenditure. That's the whole part. The money's coming from East Bay Mud on the contract. So it's not going to, it's typically we buy it in the second year, but the problem is we budgeted now for it for the simple fact that it takes us so long to get the vehicles. So we budgeted early so we can get the vehicle. Again, the money's there.
I just want to confirm, I'm sorry, Dennis.
That's quite all right. Just gotta talk it
If
through.
we say, go ahead and do this, there's zero impact on the general fund. We don't, no, we have to come up with $72,000 or $76,000 from the general fund to do what you're suggesting.
Bottom line.
Bottom
This is
line,
Oscar
right?
Flamenco. So the general fund will have to pay it first because it's a reimbursement contract,
Uh-huh.
and then we get reimbursed.
Just like we do with personnel right now.
But just to clarify, from a budget perspective, it would have to, in order to make this happen, we either need an additional general fund contribution to backstop the revenue that was budgeted without the offsetting expenditure, or we would need a reduction elsewhere in this or another budget unit. Thank you.
What's the turnaround time? What would be the turnaround time? If we expend $72,000, $75,000 out of the general fund, how long would it be sitting there before it would come back to us? 6 months, 3 months?
Depends on the RFP.
Mr. Alt?
Unless he cuts expenses.
I think-
Probably about 3 months, 3 to 4 months.
Right.
Realistically, by the time the vehicle is purchased and it's outfitted.
And then you'll get the funds from East Bay Mud, and the money will then come back into the general fund at that
Correct.
time. Well, she's saying no, you're saying yes.
So,
So,
you have Krista and I are telling you what the impact to the budget is. There is an impact to the budget. The budget was done where the revenue is reflected and the expenditure isn't there. If that happens in any other budget, what we would typically do is say, sorry, but you're going to have to make an adjustment in your budget to incorporate the expenditure in. That's one of the options. The other is that we make an adjustment somewhere else in the general fund. There is, I can't put this any clearer, there is an impact to the general fund if we don't ask the sheriff's office to make a corresponding decrease in their budget. I'm not arguing one way or another. I'm simply suggesting, I'm not even suggesting, I'm telling you very clearly there is an impact to the budget in the general fund, whether it affects their general fund budget or the rest of the general fund budget. There has to be a decrease because we have a revenue and no matching expenditure with it. If we add the expenditure in, there's an effect. I might suggest and be so bold if that's the prerogative of the board. And again, I'm not editorializing, frankly, why they're asking for the vehicle and the suggestion that we've had problems with the procurement of it. That's on our office, and I accept that. And so I know why they're trying to front load it. But I would suggest if the board were to consider doing this, that they do it in two pieces. Adopt the budget first, because we have obligations to submit the budget in a timely fashion, and if there's an adjustment now, we wouldn't have the time to make it, and then we bring a corresponding budget transfer back to the board, which requires 4/5 vote. One way or another, it's a 4/5 vote. One way or another, there's a transfer, and the direction here would be if one way or another needs to be from the board, whether we're going to absorb the effect in the contingency or another general fund budget, or we'd ask the sheriff to do that.
And I was just talking to Krista, I don't have a problem with pulling that money out of my overtime budget for right now. It's not going to be gone that long if we can do that.
Sheriff, that was my point, is it's just a matter of where do we want to put it.
Right. And if it's an adjustment to my budget, there's money in my overtime budget that we can move that money over, and then once we receive the funds back from East Bay Mud, we can put it back into the overtime budget. Your call.
Just so I'm clear, Sheriff, so you're saying we authorize you to go get the vehicle, you could take it out of your budget, and we don't have to do a budget transfer, it's internal move, is that correct? So we're not increasing your budget?
As suggested, it is. There'd only need to be adjustment to the capital asset. But if at the end of the day, I don't know what the number is, but if there's $100,000 in overtime and 100,000 of it gets expended, we're still back in the same place. If that budgeted amount is for an intended use and that intended use comes through, it doesn't matter when the revenue comes in. And it really isn't about their contract and the effect of the contract. It's about where we're at in the budget right now and the machinations that went into making it balance. So on one hand, I absolutely support what they're requesting and the Sheriff's Department having the vehicles that they need, but I need to be clear that no matter how we get there, there's a corresponding effect to the budget. And whether we take it out of contingency or ask them to make an adjustment in their general fund budget, one way or another, that adjustment has to occur. And frankly, it has to occur if we don't take the revenue either. If we don't buy the vehicle and take the revenue, there's an adjustment that way as well.
That's
So
where it's no way around
we're in
it.
a position where right now, an adjustment needs to be made no matter what. And if that adjustment is going to be made here today versus mid-year, I'd ask that we adopt the budget first in its current state and have us come back under board's direction to make a transfer in a subsequent month so that we could facilitate the vehicle being purchased and the budget being adopted consistent with the timelines in the State Budget Act.
Yeah, but his suggestion wouldn't cost us anything other than if he went over on overtime. If he goes over on overtime anyway, he says it's only going to take 3 or 4 months. The other option is, since he's going to take 3 or 4 months to get the money back, and I'm going to say it again, this time, seriously, Sheriff, you could use AB 443 funds to purchase it and then put it back into AB 443 funds. That way it doesn't affect anything. I understand what's happened here. We budgeted the money and it wasn't put in capital assets. So we're on the hook either way. Either we take $75,000 out of your budget to pay for it, or we use general funds, or if we just use funds that you have available in your department, and then when you get the money back, replace it, we're still whole. It's either way we choose to go.
Remember, the way we bill right now is,
If he's already got 70, hold on one second, he's already got it budgeted in his budget. No, he would have to give it back, you're correct, that would not work. That would not work, yeah. It would still be the same.
If the board were of the mind to make the adjustment now, and please understand, I'm only talking about the budget, I'm not editorializing about the vehicle. If we made the shift from overtime, we could have done that already with the sheriff, but he's understanding of making sure he didn't just move the shell game around. What I would suspect we probably would be doing at mid-year is looking at what kind of adjustment are we going to make at mid-year to put revenue back into their overtime account so that they have enough money to cover that. One way or another, there's an adjustment only because right now there's a discrepancy between revenue and expenditures, and that's simply a budget thing. It's not really about the vehicle.
That's right.
Supervisor Stopper?
To put it in layman's terms, $75,000 in revenue was put in. A different expenditure made it to the point where the bottom line is zero. So now if we put in this other expenditure, we're expending additional $75,000. So at some point, even with them receiving the $75,000 in revenue later, we would still have to backfill the overtime with another $75,000 from the general fund. No argument there. It was a piece missed throughout the budget process. There's no need to point the finger where that came or went from. And if we don't do that expenditure on that, then we won't receive that additional 75, so we'll be approximately 150 down?
No, it's the same 75 one way or another.
Okay.
I mean, it's
Okay.
it's
It just
75,000
doesn't matter
one
where
way
it's
or
at.
another, but
Trying to apply the same logic I was for six.
if,
One at a time.
All right.
Mr. Hall?
no, that's,
Want to finish? Supervisor Callaway?
I support the purchase of the vehicle. I do not support any general fund contribution to the sheriff's office at this time. And it'll be up to the sheriff to determine where he will get that 75 and how he will manage his budget. But I don't support adding general fund dollars to his budget at this time.
You got to remember, too, that when we bill East Bay Mud, we bill them quarterly for personnel. The vehicle, when we order the vehicle, we have to pay for that vehicle when it shows up. So if we ordered that vehicle today, that vehicle's not going to show up until probably December. And then we have to send it out to have it upfitted. That's a separate bill at a separate time. So it's not like it's $76,000 today. It's broken down.
Any other comments on Supervisor Callaway's suggestion? Mr. Mills?
Yeah, I agree. I think that if the sheriff's willing to handle this within his budget unit and how he handles it, if it's a case of coming back to us at a future point in a budget adjustment, then that's a separate conversation. But if you feel that you can handle the timelines and you're not going to affect the rest of your budget, and so it's basically, it would be out of our hands. I'm not going to micromanage your budget to the point that, you can spend it here or spend it there. You have a budget to spend. So go and do well.
Supervisor, any other comments?
So in that case, you would be left over with $25,000 in your overtime budget right now?
there's more
the
than
number
that
I
in the
threw out was
Okay,
simply for
okay, it's
illustrative
way
purposes.
different than that.
He was using that as a number.
As a number.
Right.
Careful what you say sometimes. People take it literally.
I did say,
I know you did.
for example.
I heard, that's what I heard, so those are the numbers I was rolling with.
No,
All right.
there's plenty of money in my overtime budget to do that.
Okay, so let's,
Comfortable with that, sir, I can support it.
what I'd like to do is, since we have, following from what Supervisor Callaway suggested, if that seems, it appears that that works for everybody. And so why don't we take on item 21, see if there's a motion.
I still have a question.
I'm sorry, we have a motion on the floor.
Yeah, I still have a question.
Okay.
Public comment also.
We need public comment.
We did public comment.
Okay.
The sheriff came up.
All right. It has to do with elections on the 335,000, it's now 400,000. I know that there's a state and a federal grant involving this. At what point will the grant money be coming back to our budget for that? Because we had to expend, for the vote centers, we had to expend that money up front.
I'm not sure at this point when we'd actually be reimbursed from the grant. I'd have to check to verify that.
Okay, if you just shoot me an email on it so I can understand the timeline.
Absolutely.
Okay, that was my question.
Supervisor Stopp, would you be so kind to the chair as to restate your motion?
I would move that we add the expenditure of, don't look at me like that.
Okay, well, so my apologies for interrupting. What I would ask is that the budget be adopted as recommended, and the department heads have the authority to make the changes that we've talked about with Rick at any time. We work with the department heads to do that. So in effect, you'd be adopting the budget as recommended.
And then he could do the transfer over and within his budget.
With the clarification from the board that we are authorized to increase his capital assets line out of an existing other appropriation in his budget, then that is something that the CAO's office and the Auditor Controller's office can effect together after the close of this hearing.
what she said, my motion.
Fair enough. So the motion is to adopt the budget as presented and authorize the sheriff to buy the vehicle and the CAO to work within the sheriff's budget to finalize where the money comes from.
So the motion is for both 20 and 21?
No, just one.
Yeah, we brought them both together, so yeah.
It is?
To adopt the budget?
Well, you know what, just for clarity and for records, let's do them separate.
Let's do 21, which we were just discussing, capital assets.
21 is the, sorry, guys, can't see anything.
Let's get 21
20
out
is
of
the
the way.
budget, 21 is capital assets.
And we were just,
Let's
I want to discuss.
Supervisor Stopper, can you make your motion for item 20 to adopt the budget as,
item 20?
21.
Only 21.
21, because we haven't discussed 20.
Only 21. then we
okay,
could-
only for 21.
We're hearing both right now, aren't we, Ms.
We're hearing
Stedfield?
both, but we need to make a vote on each one, I think, individually.
We have opened both item 20 and 21, but they are separate items, and so you should have a separate motion and vote on each separate item.
That's where I was.
Okay.
So if it was the appetite of the board to adjust the capital assets list, you could vote on that as suggested with the adjustment to the capital asset and then the budget. And that may have been where Supervisor Stopper was headed before I got a fearful look on my face. So my apologies if I upended that approach.
Okay, let's take, we're gonna,
I'm going to reiterate my motion
22, yes,
for 21,
okay?
To adopt it.
to adopt the capital asset budget, along with the iteration that Krista had proceeded before with, on the adjustments that are needed. Don't expect me to repeat
Is there a
that.
second on the motion?
I'll second.
Moved by Supervisor Stopper, second by Supervisor Mills. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Now we are on item 20. Is there a motion to adopt that budget?
So moved.
Well, Chair, I'd like to have discussion.
We can have discussion if we need more. Supervisor Mills?
Well, I know that during the last discussion about the roughly $5.5 million of the disaster money and the thought of washing that out of the budget or out of our books is abhorrent to me. So I really cannot support doing that. I would strongly recommend, too, that this might be an opportunity to take some pressure off of the Auditor Controller's Office and maybe go through an independent audit for the first time in how many years this county's ever done one, so that they don't have to be dealing with that side of the issue as well. But that's a separate discussion I think can be taken up. But cleaning the slate on that $5.5 million is just, that's a little bit tough to deal with. So unless we can have a conversation on how we might do it to gain support, I would not be in support.
Actually, it's more than 5.5 because we're backfilling with the 2 million over what we projected at preliminary budget, and we're taking 2 million out of Teeter Fund, actually draining Teeter Fund down to $70,000. It's almost like writing off a bad debt. If we don't show it anywhere, it's nowhere in here, that $9.5 million, we're not going to pursue it. It's not front and center anywhere. It's like writing it off and walking away from it and saying, well, if we get it, it's free money, we can put it in contingencies. But it doesn't seem that without it being front and center and visible like it has been, that we may not be pursuing it as vigorously as we need to and finish and close out these projects. So I'm in the same way. I can't support the budget the way it's written. It's too much of a strain. It may balance the budget this year, but if we have a disaster this winter, or we have a fire coming up, or we have any type of disaster, we don't have funds available. We've drained all the funds. We drained the contingencies down to 1.3. The only thing we haven't touched is the general fund reserve, but it looks like we won't get through this year without tapping into that. we need to keep this money out there in front and visible so we can go after it and continue to go after it. Just writing it off, what it appears to be as a bad debt, to me is not right. So I can't support the budget the way it's written.
Supervisor Stop.
I think that it was put very much front and center on the issue. That's why it was presented the way it was. In years past, consistently revenue that's been put before this board that I've gone through past budgets has been produced with these disaster funds where they didn't receive this money and it was closed out. The 18-19 budget that was put out last year was approximately $10 million in expenditures past revenue that was presented before this board and voted on. That's a structural deficit, not a deficit. So when it was brought up and we inserted $50,000 to help OES close these out, we very much so put forward a way to address this issue now that it's come to light that these things haven't been closed out since 2015 when the Butte fire happened. And consistently since then, until now, those have showed revenue that hasn't been realized. This is the first time we're showing that the revenue isn't realized for the very fact that it hasn't been realized in the 3 prior fiscal years. So with due respect, it is disconcerting, and I understand where my fellow supervisors to my right and left are bringing up this issue, but we are coming at it in a different direction and addressing it now, where before it was never said. It was just, we're getting this money in, we're going to close these things out. Now it's the realization that in the last three fiscal years, the work hadn't been done to the full extent it needed to be. We need to put the work forward now, and until that work's put forward and we close these out, we won't realize that revenue. And so what's before us is reality, as opposed to what the last 3 years in fiscal budgets that have been presented, where that revenue wasn't realized because the work wasn't done. It's first and foremost up front now. Therefore, again, I'll say it again, the reason I brought up adding another $50,000 to OES to address these issues and get them closed out.
Yes, sir. We have a motion by Supervisor Callaway. We're seeking a second. I got to tell you, I'm not quite sure I understand why you guys aren't voting for this budget. We've all worked together on this for months. Sorry. Why we've all worked together on this budget for months. Some of these adjustments are specifically, that you're complaining about, were specifically called out. To have that done, for example, using the teeter versus using reserves, that's a matter of respecting your opinion on that, and we did it. So I'm a little disappointed that you guys aren't on board, but we're seeking a second to Supervisor Callaway's motion.
The using of the teeter funds and draining that account and using the $2.2 million that we had over a preliminary budget was brought up to us last week, or September 10th, when we had no knowledge of that ever happening. All of a sudden, from preliminary budget, where it was on the books, and we agreed to that preliminary budget, till September, when the final was, it was wiped out. We never had that discussion. We never brought it to us until September 10th, and I voiced concern at that time, several times during that meeting, that I was not in agreement of it. So we have had that conversation, Jack.
Okay, so we got a motion. I'm seeking a second.
I'll second.
Second. Call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed? No.
Supervisor Stopper, Supervisor Callaway, Supervisor Garamendi, aye. Did I miss something? Supervisor Toffenelli, Supervisor Mills, no. Budget carries. We'll move on to item 21.
22. 22.
Excuse me, 22. And we are convening as the Calaveras County Air Pollution Control District Board.
So item 22 is from the Administrative Office, sitting and taking action as the Calaveras County Air Pollution Control District Board, and adopt a resolution adopting the fiscal year 2019-20 Air Pollution Control District final budget in the amount of $265,687.
Thank you. Who's presenting on this?
As with the other items we had before us, these were reviewed on September 10th, and they were discussed at the hearings, and now they're before the board for action.
Very well. Are there any questions from the board? Any statements from the public? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Is there a motion or further discussion?
So moved.
Moved by Supervisor Mills. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Supervisor Callaway. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0.
Item 23 is from the Administrative Office, sitting and taking action as the Calaveras County In-Home Supportive Services Public Authority, and adopt a resolution adopting the fiscal year 2019-20 In-Home Supportive Services Public Authority final budget in the amount of $587,093.
Very well. We are sitting as the Calaveras County In-Home Supportive Service Public Authority. Is there any further presentation on this? Any questions from the board? Public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Is there further discussion or a motion?
I just have a question. I looked at, there was a reduction, excuse me, in revenue to this budget. Is there a way that there's going to be increases to the IHS? I'm not sad, I just have a frog in my throat. It's getting ready for the frog jump.
Here's some water, please.
I have some. That there's an increase to compensation for IHSS workers in this.
So I see Kristen and Marcos here.
Sorry, Kristen. Okay. Good morning, Kristen Stranger, Health and Human Services. So to speak specifically to provider wages, we do have, based off of the minimum wage impacts, increases that are happening statewide, right? And that is being carried out to Calaveras County as well. Those are put together as part of the overall budget. And in terms of locally negotiated increases, we do not have any local negotiations going on at this very time. Does that answer your specific question?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Very well. We've had public comment. I'm bringing it back to the board. Discussion or a motion on item 23? Is there a motion?
I move this item.
I'll second this item.
Item is moved by Supervisor Callaway and is seconded by Supervisor Toffenelli. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Very well. Carries 5-0.
Item 24 is from Public Works, to authorize the board chair to execute Amendment 1 to an agreement with Holdridge and Cole Consulting Engineers and Geologists in the amount of $33,884 for a new not-to-exceed amount of $132,334 for the period of January 8, 2019 through December 31st, 2020, in order to complete the design phase of the 2017 winter storm Gwynn Mine Road Repair Project.
Mr. Pack?
Good morning, Chair and members of the board. I'm Joshua Pack. I'm your Director of Public Works and Transportation. The timing in this, it's a minor amendment to the contract to complete additional testing necessary to complete the design and move forward through to construction. for the Gwynn Mine project relating to the 2017 winter storms. The increase was tied to the adoption of the budget, so we couldn't move on this until the board adopted that. Time is of the essence on this. We're trying to get this wrapped up so we can build this next spring, and that's why we scheduled this today instead of waiting for about 2 or 3 weeks to schedule it for the first meeting in October. So again, with the adoption of the budget, the funds are now eligible for use. So again, pretty minor, modest amendment. Under most circumstances, probably under consent calendar. But with that said, I'd be happy to entertain any questions you may have about this project.
Very well. Any questions from the board? Supervisor Mills?
Josh, with your amendment, do you feel that those funds will be recoverable?
Yeah, it's a great question. So Gwynn Mines is one of 3 projects of the 5 remaining for the disaster recoveries that when they were originally scoped by FEMA, they weren't for the entire project. They were for only a certain portion of the project. And so what we're doing right now as part of the efforts with this is to have FEMA rescope the project. So FEMA will go forward, rescope the project. Once they approve the project, we'll move forward to the construction. The good thing about this and the other ones is because we are going through the rescoping project, FEMA is identifying the updated costs. And so I think there's a very strong likelihood that we will recover these. And it's always, especially with consultants, that time is, we track that accurately. We have billable invoices. Those are reimbursed as time spent on the project. So it's a very easy way, and we've met or exceeded the requirements for the procurement of the services. So it's very highly likely that we'll recover these expenses.
Thank you. Supervisor Stopper, you have a question?
Sorry, doing numbers. Very minimal, so 6.25% is the cost to the county overall.
Yeah, I think of the reimbursable expense, FEMA is 75 and Calaveras pays the proportion. I think general fund is, or the remaining 6.25 is through the county, correct.
Okay, so about $8,000.
You're talking of the total amount or of the additional amount that we've requested? Because the board's already approved this original contract. Yeah, so the original amount of $33,000 at 6% is, about, $1,500, $1,600 or so, maybe a little shy of 2,000.
Understood. I was going through some other numbers up above on the total cost on this, but yeah, going back to the consultant fee and everything. Never mind. It's a legitimate question.
Fair enough.
Very well. Seeing no further questions from the board, are there public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back again to the board for further discussion or a motion.
Sir, so moved.
Second.
Moved by Supervisor Stopper, second by Supervisor Mills. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0.
Supervisor announcements. In compliance with AB 1234, Chapter does Government Code Section 53232.3D, board members shall provide brief reports on meetings they attended at the expense of the local agency at the next regular meeting of the legislative body. This report is required to include meetings attended for which there has been expense reimbursement, mileage, meals, lodging, etc., but may also, at the board member's discretion, include any other meeting attended by the supervisor on behalf of the county.
Supervisor Mills, your light's on. You can begin.
Oh, okay, thanks. Wednesday, 11th, down to Stockton again for the Eastern San Joaquin Groundwater Basin Authority. Hopefully everybody has gotten their plan, so they've had a chance to review it and provide any comments or get prepared to provide comments. We're going to be needing to adopt that by the end of this year. Thursday the 12th, Murphy Sanitary District and Copper Fire. Monday the 16th, LAFCO. Thank you. I had a good time. Wednesday the 8th, Fire Safe Council. Saturday the 21st, Angels Night Out. And a great announcement for those ranchers in Calaveras County. We finally got an approval from the Bureau of Land Management, actually the Bureau of Reclamation, to allow grazing around New Melones on Bureau of Land Management land for both Calaveras and Tuolumne County. The ranchers have been duly notified by Supervisor Brennan from their county and here. The Arolas, whose property was literally taken up with the Glory Hole project for New Melones, had been trying since that time, which we got to go back into the 70s to gain those grazing rights. So it's a big win. It's taken about 6 months to do it, but we've got it. And if you are a rancher adjacent to the New Melones, contact me or go directly to the Bureau of Land Management website and make an application. $100.
Supervisor Stopper? Supervisor Toffenelli?
Yeah, I went to several meetings. LAFCO was one of them, but nothing that I billed the county on. But I do want to bring up an announcement that October 16th in Valley Springs at the Veterans Hall, Supervisor Stopper and myself will have a town meeting concerning the Valley Springs Community Plan. So that time is from 6 to 7:30. It's October 16th, 6 to 7:30 at the Vets Hall. Valley Springs Community Plan is the topic. That's all I have.
Thank you. Supervisor Callaway?
Nothing to.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple things to report. The first one is one of our staff members, Susan, our videographer, had an announcement at the beginning of the meeting, and it's kind of hard for her to run up from behind the cameras to get up there, so I will make it on her behalf, that there is an event on September 27th from 10 to 3. It's called I Matters Caring for the Caregiver Conference. And this is where you'll get a chance to sit down with other caregivers to increase your awareness and understanding of coping with the many challenges of caregiving. I think we all recognize it as a task and a burden, and finding ways to work together and get resources is very helpful. It'll be held at the San Andreas Town Hall on 24 Church Street. Again, that's September 27th, 10 to 3. I Matter Caring for Caregivers. Thank you, Susan, for bringing that forward. I will be up at RCRC conference for the next couple of days. I want to ask the board to, we have a meeting on, our next meeting is October 1st. I would hope that you could keep the 2nd open as well. We may have a long day on the 1st and need to bleed over. So if you can do that, it'd be greatly appreciated. And if, Mr. Alt, do you have anything you want to add? Madam Counselor? Madam Clerk? Very well. We stand adjourned.